I think that perhaps we're also addressing, at least in part, the same. Well, I mean, the our audience, the ones that we're trying to reach out to, are partly the same in the sense that we are both doing some stuff that's not dead, trying to be realistic, trying to deliver some actual value and not some pure Ponzi and so on.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the part of the ethos of DeFi 2.0 is something I think it's called real yield, where the
Yeah.
projects, the actual returns that projects are paying out to investors is coming from actual revenue generated by the protocol, as opposed to the Ponzi system where the payout is just based on new investors coming in. So always happy to see people who are building out projects that have real and sustainable sources of revenue. So
Yeah, and well, your transition to Lava 2.0 is also part of that. Well, DeFi 2.0, as you mentioned it.
yeah, definitely. Especially with our revenue share system, where the returns are coming from the seed investments that we've made, as well as the returns from our sister projects. And with our sister projects, they're actually being built with um, they're being built with focus on generating actual revenue, as opposed to the Ponzonomic node structure that requires a constant influx of new users. So I'm excited about those as well. And just as an example, like with Divi, which is our derivatives platform, the actual revenue that would go to stakers is coming from trading fees generated from borrowing, um, as well as from the fees paid by market makers to actually create trading pools and to offer derivatives against. So excited about that, as well as Prism, which is also similar in the sense that revenue is generated by fees every time someone deploys a particular automation. So
Yeah, I kind of like Prism. Really, it's something I'm looking forward to use for some of my investments. I mean, as an investor.
yeah, and the great thing about Prism is that it's very versatile. Like it's not really confined to one particular use. So if you want, projects, for instance, can use it for something like treasury management, or they could use it to implement their own stability mechanism, or for airdrops. It's very versatile, and the use cases you know are really up to the user, because we're essentially just providing almost like a blank slate with building blocks. So what you really build is up to is just up to the user, and you know and yeah, like it's really only limited by what you're already able to do manually.
Mm. Yeah, I see. We're going to launch in a week or so, and at that time we'll have more visibility about how much we have in the treasury and what exact choices we make in our investments. So I think that we should have a private conversation about it at that point.
Definitely, we'll definitely touch base. All right, I think if you'd like, we can get started, and as we discuss, more people will join in. So.
Are you regarding the AMA?
Yeah, I got it on record. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
So, do you want to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about one, and give some brief background information just for some of the new faces we have here who might not be so familiar with it?
I'm sorry, I just had a mic issue. Can you repeat?
No worries. I said, did you want to give a brief introduction of your project, and also introduce yourself just for the new faces that we have, for those who may not be familiar with what you're building?
Yeah, sure. So my background is in political sciences and communication. My job is essentially to make the connection between some media, some journalists, and some companies, and try to have a good image for the companies I work for. And I've started dabbling into DeFi in August, September of last year. So I started by doing some like farming stuff, usually on Polygon, and then I went into the DAO era with a lot of Olympus forks. And one thing that has struck me is that if you looked at the white papers, they would have this maybe 100K% or even 1 million% APY, but because they had a few taxes, sometimes they would say that it was a very sustainable system, and well, it worked for usually a few days to a few weeks, some of them up to maybe 2 months. But in retrospective, it should have been fairly obvious that if your APY is 1 million%, your sustainability is close to zero, because you need the higher the APR, the more buy pressure, the more newcomers you need to buy in order to offset the sell pressure. And that's when I started thinking about how can we make an Ohm fork sustainable. So I had a lot of ideas, and I came to the conclusion that if you actually want to be sustainable and deliver some real yield, you cannot have an APY that is set because you think that this is the right APR, or because you want it as a marketing tool or something like that. If there is an APR, it should be coming from actual money coming in, and not from the contract saying this is the APR, and even if there is no investor, this is still going to be the APR. So we moved quite far away from the Ohm fork model. We don't have a rebasing token, for instance, which I think is one of the main aspects of the Ohm protocols. And essentially, Wand is centered around 2 tokens. The first is Scepter. Scepter is a token that will only appreciate in value. The price of Scepter is not set on a DEX or on a liquidity pool or a liquidity pair. It is set by the smart contract. And the smart contract says that the price of Scepter is equal to the value of the Scepter treasury divided by the number of Scepter tokens. So the price is set by this ratio between the treasury and the number of tokens. And whenever we can increase that ratio, we will increase the price of Scepter. And we have designed several mechanisms to increase that ratio to ensure that it's only going to increase. One thing to mention is that it's in that treasury we only have stable coins. So we don't expect the value of the treasury to decrease ever, because we're quite careful in the stable coins that we choose, and in how we invest them, in how we farm with it. The first way that we have to increase that ratio, and therefore the price of Scepter, is by some taxes. If you buy Scepter, you buy it slightly above that ratio, and the gap between the ratio and the price at which you buy is going to the treasury as well. And this gap means that the price will increase for everyone else. So that's one way to increase the price. The second is that if you sell below that ratio or below the backing price, and again, the gap between the two stays in the treasury. So, and this is very uncommon, but if you sell Scepter, the price is going to increase for all the people that are holding, which also means that if you're holding and some other people are selling, the value of the asset that you hold increases, and you earn more money because other people are selling. So in a lot of protocols, it's kind of a race where you want to be the first to buy, wait for the price to increase, and sell before everyone else sells. With Scepter, it's more like you want to get in before the price increases, and you want to sell after the other people sell and after they buy, because the more people will buy and sell before you sell, the more money you get. And then another way to increase that ratio or the value in the treasury is by farming with the stable coins in the treasury. So at the moment, we are looking at some strategies to farm in a way that's like safe and to generate a good yield. We have our eyes on three different protocols. The first is Alpaca Finance, which has a great track record at optimizing yield. The second is Grizzly. It's fairly new, but they seem to be going well. They have some audit and they are based on PancakeSwap. And the third is Beethoven X, which is a fork of Balancer. So this is for Scepter. Then if you want slightly more risk and a different way to earn money, you can burn your Scepter to receive Baton token. With Baton, what happens is that you hold Baton, and behind it there is a different treasury, and that treasury is a mix of stable coins, native network coins such as Phantom, AVAX, BNB, Matic, and so on, and also a few blue chip tokens like Ethereum or Bitcoin. And that treasury is going to be farming and automatically rebalancing, which is a way to automatically sell high and buy low. And a part of the rewards will be compounding continuously. And another part of the rewards from the treasury are going to be sent as airdrops to the Baton holders in USDC. So essentially, you just hold Baton, and every week you get some USDC airdrops. If the market is neutral or green, the airdrops are going to be increasing on a weekly or monthly basis. If the market is really red, well, the rewards are going to be lower, so the airdrops are also going to be lower, because we are part of this real yield movement where we don't mint tokens out of thin air. We cannot create magically some money. So the main way for the Baton to get some money is at the moment from the treasury. So it's also it's depending on the market to some extent. So we will have like some low to medium risk investment strategies. But unlike Scepter, which is based on stable coins, with Baton there is some the performance is more dependent on the market than it is dependent on the investors' behaviors.
Gotcha. So because it's a little bit more dynamic and the airdrops, depend on, I guess, market conditions for Baton holders, will you guys have some sort of calculator where users will be able to see how much they can expect to receive, I guess, on a rolling basis?
So we won't have some kind of dashboard where you can see what you will receive, because it's very difficult to know, and it would be deceiving one way or another, I think. But what we do have is some calculator about the track record, about how much airdrops you got per Baton token last week and over the last 3 months. Because let's say that we are 4 months after our launch, we know how we have fared. We will have all the data about the airdrops that we will have delivered, so we can display that. But for instance, it's my belief that at the moment the market is in a kind of a dead cat bounce. So I think that the prices are going to crash again. I'm not exactly sure either, and like a lot of analysts and economists are like debating this, and there is no certainty about the state of the market. So I think that it would be a bit like, either we have some very optimistic predictions and it's a bit deceiving, or we tend more to be on the pessimist side, and we may like show some numbers that will not be attractive at all. So
I like that. It's always
yeah.
better to under promise and over deliver than give people false expectations of what they can expect and then have them be disappointed when you can't deliver on that. So I'm glad you're approaching it that way. So Joe asked a question that I suppose is pretty relevant. So he said, after many months of developing and preparing for launch, do you feel that this is the best time to do it? And then I guess just to add on, if you feel that now is the best time, why now versus at some point in the future?
So I'm not sure that there is a best time to actually launch. In terms of image, the more volume there will be, the better it will be for us, because it looks better if you launch with 2 million market cap or 2 million of raise versus 200K of raise. That's just a better image.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we are not in this situation that a lot of projects are, where they need to fight a huge amount of sell pressure. It's just not going to be our case. We can allow ourselves to have a long-term vision. So I think that the amount of volume will be a bit disappointing because the market kind of sucks. So we have some strong fundamentals, we have a strong community, but a lot of the community members also don't have the money to invest as much as they wish they could. So it's not the best time in terms of volume, but in terms of all the contextual elements, I think it's a pretty good time for a few reasons. The first is that I don't think the market will get better anytime soon. So it's, even if it's not the best time, in a scale of months, it's still one of the best times. Also, we're choosing early September because a lot of we see traditionally that there is much less volume in July and August versus September. So we're waiting for people to come back from holiday to stop hanging around at the beach, and then when they come back from holiday, okay, one is launching. It's a great time because we expect a bit more volume because of it's the time of the year. And there's another reason that is internal, which is that we are working on SpaceDex. SpaceDex is a DEX that is cross-chain with single asset staking, no impermanent loss. And we're working on a technology which we call dual asset allocation. And essentially, we want to cross-allocate 80% of our TVL to be farming on 2 places at once. So that means that if you're farming with SpaceX, you will have an APR that is 2 to 3 times higher than what you would get on some other DEXs. So it's going to attract quite a lot of TVL, quite a lot of transaction volume also, because when you have more TVL, the swaps have less slippage. Which means that it attracts more transaction volume. And a share of the fees from SpaceX are going to go to the warm treasuries. So I wanted the gap between the warm launch and the SpaceX launch to be relatively shorter, and it's also why we chose not to launch in July, for instance.
Gotcha. So how far along are you guys in terms of development with when it comes to SpaceX?
So we have I don't know, I would call it proof of concept. The design is almost done. The website, the front end code is ongoing. The backend code is more towards the beginning. At first, I wanted us to build it completely from scratch. But the more we go, the more it seems like the idea is nice, but it's not very pragmatic. So we are going to fork Bancor V3. For those who know it, it's one of the major DEXs on Ethereum. Just to mention that lately they had some issue with their impermanence loss protection mechanism. I just want to reassure everyone that we are not forking that far. We have devised or created our own impermanence loss protection mechanism, but there how they created all the single asset staking and the omni pool, it's a very nice way to do it. So by forking that part and adding our own developments to it, our own add-ons, um, we we build on something that is already managing billions of dollars, something that's already audited, something that's already developed. So it's a way that is safer and faster to create SpaceX for us.
Yeah, I like that. It's definitely more feasible to go with something that's tried and tested, as opposed to reinventing the wheel and, developing everything from scratch. So I'm glad you guys are approaching it that way. Mowgli94 asked, on Discord, there are talks of launching on DEXs too at some point in the future. Will it be possible to apply the buy and sell concept to a DEX in your opinion, differentiating the Scepter backing price from the Scepter buy price and the Scepter sell price?
Well, that's essentially what happens whenever there is a tax. So I think it's very much possible. One thing, there will be one difficulty to get on some DEXs, which is that if you go on the DEX, you need a liquidity pair and you need a fair amount of money in that liquidity pair. And that's a problem for us because we are using that liquidity to be farming and to use the revenues to increase the price of Scepter. That's also why the first DEX where Scepter is going to launch is going to be on SpaceX. I mentioned the benefits for the investors of SpaceX, like a higher APR, that it's you just single stake your asset and everything. But for the other projects, there are also some benefits to use SpaceX. One is that if you provide your liquidity pair on SpaceX, let's say Scepter to BUSD, you can be bought from different chains. So if you're an investor and you don't want to go on the BSC chain or Binance Smart Chain, you can do it from another chain. Like you're in Phantom, you have some either some Boo or some Spirit or some whatever, pretty much. You're on Phantom, you use your tokens to buy Scepter, which you get on the Binance Smart Chain without going on the Binance Smart Chain yourself. It also works if you're on AVAX or on some other chain. And another thing is that our liquidity pair is like some Scepter and some BUSD, the two tokens are not in a pair; they are in separate kind of unique liquidity pools. And that means that our BUSD is going to be farming as well. So it's also going to be generating some revenues, and those revenues are also going to be increasing the price of Scepter. So because SpaceX has this feature to generate revenues for the projects that are depositing their tokens on the platform on the DEX, it's also meeting that criteria of Scepter that we want the price to increase by farming with the treasury. And if we put that treasury in another DEX where there won't be as much volume, then we would create less. There would be less fees, less volume, and the price of Scepter would appreciate at a slower rate. So that's also one reason to create SpaceX.
Gotcha. So I know you already went into it a little earlier, but Mia wanted to know if you could explain how the WAN token works. So I don't know if you wanted to just circle back and just briefly describe that again for some of the new members who joined.
Yeah, sure. So the WAN tokens is used only by the protocol. So as an investor, you're never going to see the face of it. whenever we mint a Scepter token, we also mint a WAND token, and if we burn a Scepter token, we burn a WAND token. So there is a 1-to-1 ratio between Scepter and WAND tokens. The WAND token will have the same value as a Scepter because it is also backed by the Scepter treasury. And we're going to use it as a collateral against which we're going to borrow some stable coins which we are going to invest. And the difference between the APR for borrowing and the APR for farming is going to stay in the Scepter treasury. So it's essentially like something that is going to work in the background that you guys will never see except in the governance channel, but never in your wallet, and that we're using to boost the price appreciation of Scepter and therefore your benefits.
Awesome. Just going back to some of the earlier questions. Let's see. So Mowgli asked earlier, since you say that you're the opposite of a tomb/own fork, are the tokenomics all created from scratch in-house, or did you take inspiration from any particular project? I think this question is referring to one specifically because you addressed how you guys are building out the actual space stacks, which is based on Bancor.
Oh yeah. I agree. It's more for one. I mean, I didn't. So my idea was to say, okay, I want to create something that's sustainable and rewarding for the investors, which at its extreme means 0% APY in the sense that we only mint the tokens that are being bought by some investors. And from there, I've been kind of creating some mechanisms and everything, which ended up being WAND. So I did create it from scratch with a lot of back and forth and discussions with some crypto friends. But still, I have been creating it when it was still home season, well, more towards the end. But also in a context where we started seeing some nodes. So, I mean, there is some inspirations from the other protocols. For instance, if you take Scepter, the fact that you buy it from the DApp and not on a DEX, it's somewhat close to bonding in the home forks. Baton, where you give up your initial capital and you receive some airdrops or some money on a regular basis. We can say that there are some similarities with a node. It's not really a node, but there are some common points. So it is created from scratch, but I mean any kind of creative work works based on what things that we have seen, things that we have worked with. So it's not created on a vacuum, but it's also very far from being a fork.
Gotcha. Thanks for the explanation. So I guess as for your partnerships, did you want to dive into that a little bit about other projects that you're potentially working with, that you partnerships that are on the table, and I guess current partnerships for both WAND and SpaceX?
So for WAND, what we're looking at in terms of partnerships at the moment is well, there are some in terms of KYC and audit and everything, of course, but it's more like we are the customer. It's not a proper partnership, I would say. What we're looking is to work with Ola for a lending platform for the WAND token. And at the moment, this is the main partnership that we are looking forward to because it's going to be the one that's effective on the short term. We will also be working with Collectivers. They are making the system where you can essentially bridge a token and a credit card. So what we want is that if you hold some Baton, you can choose to receive your USDC airdrops on a credit card. So you can essentially buy whatever you want with your airdrops without needing to do anything before you can use it for some for whatever you want to buy in the real life. Because ultimately what we want is that we want to make it as simple as possible to use. For SpaceX, we are working kind of behind the scenes with the two yield optimizers. One is Optify, working mainly on Ethereum at the moment. And the other one, which I have joined as a team member, which is IB. This one is a bit more complicated because they've created an amazing tool, but then a team member rugged, and they are trying to recover the funds at the moment. But they are going to rebrand and to launch under a different name, and I'm helping them with that. I'm also going to be on the multi-sig, and there will be some additional safety mechanisms so that the way there was a rug cannot happen again. That's a very important point. But their take is amazing, and I'm looking forward to work with them for SpaceX because the like what they want to create is very much aligned with what we need for our dual asset allocation technology. So it's an important partnership that we are looking forward to. There are some other partnerships that we are working on at the moment, including one which will allow us to create a trading suite that is decentralized and that is using some artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. I cannot give you the name yet because it's not finalized, and I don't want to do. Well, I don't want to give a name before they agree with it. But we are looking forward to it.
So when you say that platform is using artificial intelligence, is that to I guess generate specific trading strategies that users can then employ on their own and that are relevant to the users? How are they using artificial intelligence in this case?
At the moment, I'm not very much of a trader myself. I've been doing a bit of shorting when it was clearly a bear market, but that's pretty much it. It's not about creating some bots, if that's your question. It's really about creating some indicators that have been fed and trained with the AI to kind of give some maybe some forms of I would say prediction, but like of course there is always a margin of error, and
Gotcha.
I would give some indicators that can be something that's actionable by the trader.
Gotcha. So it's more providing insights, and then the user would have to take action once they had received those whatever those indicators were, as opposed to completely automating the actual trading from the user's account.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that there are a lot of bots. Some of them do very well, some of them don't, but usually it's because they are new. We are not going into that field.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. Let's see. So one question I had about SpaceX is there a plan to launch on just a few specific chains initially, and then to add support for additional networks later down the line? How are you guys approaching that?
So in terms of cross-chain capabilities, we're going to be using multi-chain, which supports the main EVM chains, which is like 80 or 90% TVL of DeFi. So it's quite comprehensive. At first, we want to launch on Phantom because, well, there is a lot of bad sentiment around Phantom that I'm aware of. But in terms of technology, they are safe. They have some of the cheapest fees, and they have they're extremely fast. So on a technical level, they are doing an excellent work. So this will be the chain of launch where we start. Then we want to implement the chains one by one, like AVAX, Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, and so on. The rate at which we do that is not decided yet, and the limitations will not be due to development because from a development perspective, the code will be fairly well, pretty much the same. So basically, if you create something, if all the interconnections are made between Phantom and Binance, it will require just a few lines of code to be changed to also be interoperable with, let's say, Polygon, because of that's just how multi-chain works. But when we launch on a new chain, we're going to want to market that. And we want to be focusing our marketing on one chain at a time. Like at the moment, I'm working on some marketing for Wand, of course.
And that's just to maximize the liquidity for that specific chain.
It's more to manage the time dedicated to marketing. Like I see right now how much time it takes to organize all the the AMAs, of course, but some Twitter giveaways, this and that, and it takes a lot of time. And I don't think that our team would be able to pull off to launch on, let's say, 5 chains at the same time and have a quality marketing on each and every one of them. It's just not realistic. And we want to be making the most of every chain where we launch and taking them one at a time, also to work on the business development, approaching the projects on that chain and just showing them how we work, what we can offer them, to convince some of them to put their native token and their liquidity pairs on SpaceX. All of that is going to take a lot of time behind the scenes. And I think it will be more impactful in terms of image, and it will allow us to reach out to a wider audience if we take the chains one at a time.
Gotcha. Have you guys looked at adding support for non-EVM compatible chains like Solana, Atom, or some of the other Cosmos or IBC chains?
Yeah, initially I wanted us to launch on Evmos. Evmos is an EVM chain that is like you write it in Solidity, so it's perfectly compatible with all the other EVM chains. But it's also connected with IBC, like Internet of Blockchain, with all the Cosmos ecosystem. But there is no bridge between Evmos and the other EVM chains for the cores. So there are several types of bridges. Usually, you use a bridge to transfer some tokens. But what we need is also to transfer some contract calls, which is essentially the contract on Phantom, giving information or telling the contract on Polygon what to do, and vice versa. It takes a very specific kind of bridge. And
have you looked into AnyCall? AnyCall is
yeah.
AnyCall, yeah, they actually provide support for that sort of thing, so you can call contracts between different chains.
Yeah, and that's actually the one that we will be using. It's with multi-chain, but they don't support Evmos. And I haven't found one bridge that allows us to do some contract calls between the EVM and the Cosmos chains. So I've put an emphasis on the EVM chains because this is where this is the ecosystem that I know. This is where I trade. This is where we build Wand, and this is where 90% of the TVL is. So when we can grow further, we will. Maybe at some point we're also going to create a stage channel on Constellation. It's a maybe because their tech is not public yet and everything, but if they manage to pull off what they say they will, it would be a great chain where we could migrate eventually and be compatible with all the chains. But at the moment, for some technical reasons, we need to be limited to the main EVM chains.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Juice and Larry, is there anything that you guys wanted to add or dive into?
I saw a question.
Oh, good.
Oh,
That's
sorry,
good.
sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say you pretty much answered any questions that I had. It was a great explanation overall. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I saw a question because originally we had planned to launch on Phantom, and it was before the hardcore further on Phantom. And then we started having some, well, because a lot of committee members were like, really, you're gonna launch on Phantom? Are you sure it's a good idea? So we took that into consideration and we put it up to a vote, and the community voted on Binance Smart Chain. So this is where we're going to launch. But for my part, I'm still convinced that Phantom is a great chain. They don't have the TVR that they deserve. So we're not going to launch there, but the answer is yes. I'm still quite a fan of Phantom.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that there was you know, a bit of a fallout after Andre left and after what happened with Solidly. But I think, you know, the point of Phantom is to build things quickly and you know, break things and, you know, keep iterating. And that's why, you know, Andre, whenever he had an idea, he would usually choose Phantom as the chain to, you know, to actually launch it on and to experiment. And I thought people were aware of that, so it's just, you know, it's kind of unfortunate just to see that you know, to see the sort of reaction that there's been. And yeah, because I think, you know, like you said, it's the transactions are fast, the fees are low, and even still there are, you know, projects that are, you know, that are innovating and pushing, I guess, pushing the boundaries, so to speak, and choosing to launch on Phantom first. So I'm hoping that we'll see, you know, a comeback in the future for projects that are looking to build on Phantom. But yeah, it's a shame to see, you know, I guess the pushback over the past few months.
Yeah, which is understandable. I mean, they had Andrew Conjure, and there was this whale that was about to be liquidated with I don't know how many $1 billion, and I mean it was such a series of bad events.
Yeah, and then there was that.
Yeah.
I think there was an issue with one of the oracles on a lending platform. I think it was like a money market, so people were able to essentially borrow against worthless assets and, you know, it essentially caused a bank run on this protocol. I forget the name of it, but that was no good as well. So
Yeah, no, I can imagine that.
anyways, if anyone listening has any other questions, be sure to post them in the One Investments AMA channel. I think if there aren't any questions, we'll wrap it up in the next few minutes. Is there anything else that you wanted to add that you feel, you know, people should know about, or, you know, I guess future trends?
Yeah, so I will just a few things, some questions that were gonna come, because we're going to be launching without a DEX. We won't be listed on CMC or DeFi Llama and so on, but we are going to have an in-house DApp with the chart of the scepter price, with the value of the battle drops and everything. So we're not going to benefit from the visibility from such platform, but a lot of information is going to be available. So in terms of transparency, I think we're building quite an amazing tool. Our pre-sale is going to start on August 31st. And then the launch is on September 2nd. And for Space Days, we don't have a launch date yet, but the seed funding is ongoing, and it's a way to buy space tokens at a 50% discount. So this is this was kind of the sales pitch. But yeah, if also we have planned like for this AMA to give some whitelist spots for the best questions. So I think that we already have some names now.
For sure. And then if for the winners, just make sure I would suggest that they join your server just to go and claim the actual whitelist spot. So,
Yeah, definitely.
okay, so I think now that there are no additional questions, we can just about wrap up the AMA. Thank you for coming on again. It's always good to have you. Hopefully we'll continue to work together in the future as you know after your launch and once Prism and Divi are both more developed. Maybe maybe we'll work together doing something with those.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it, and thank you again for the invitation, for the warm welcome, and for all your questions.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.